On a quiet summer morning in 1908, in one of the most remote and untouched places on Earth, the sky suddenly split open. People who happened to be awake at that hour spoke of a blinding, white-blue fireball tearing across the heavens, brighter than the sun, silent at first, too silent, unnervingly silent, before the atmosphere itself seemed to scream. What followed was an explosion so powerful it flattened an entire forest the size of a small country, sent shockwaves across continents, and lit up the night skies of Europe as if a second dawn had risen. And yet, no crater was found. No fragments. No impact site. No definitive answers. The largest explosion in recorded history, stronger than any nuclear bomb humanity would ever later create, had no obvious cause. What happened that day in Tunguska remains one of history's strangest unsolved catastrophes. And it begins, as all great mysteries do, with a moment that almost no one saw, but the entire planet felt. In the early hours of June 30, 1908, the remote Siberian taiga was quiet. Siberia itself was a place that resisted time. Vast swamps, endless forests, and landscapes so untouched that even maps at the time left large blank areas. The Evenki people, nomadic reindeer herders, were among the few inhabitants of the region, living in scattered camps far from the modern world. Life there relied on silence, listening to the wind, watching the patterns of migrating herds, predicting storms by subtle shifts in the trees. But that morning, something appeared in the sky that no wind, no forest, and no ancient story had ever prepared them for. Eyewitnesses reported that the sky split in two. One man described it as if the world itself had lifted to reveal a burning heart beneath. Another said that the light was so bright he felt as though he could see through his own hands. The fireball raced across the sky from southeast to northwest, leaving behind a glowing trail. It was enormous, far larger and brighter than any meteor the world had ever documented. The Evenki hunters who saw it instinctively dropped to the ground, convinced that it must be a sign from the gods. Some fled into the forest, others simply stared, frozen in awe. Then came silence again, too much silence. The fireball didn't roar as it moved. Witnesses described it as gliding, as though the atmosphere had been muted for those few unforgettable seconds. But silence never stays still for long. Almost a full minute after the fireball appeared, the world erupted. A massive shockwave slammed down from the sky, flattening more than 80 million trees across 2,000 square kilometers. It was a detonation so powerful that scientists later estimated it at 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, roughly 1,000 times stronger than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The blast wave knocked people off their feet hundreds of kilometers away. Windows shattered in villages so distant they had never heard of Tunguska. Herds of reindeer were killed instantly by the shock. Whole forests were crushed flat, all their trees pointing outward from a central point like the spokes of a massive wooden wheel. For those closer to the explosion, it was as if the air itself had turned into a weapon. An Evenki man named Semyon witnessed the shockwave tear his tent from the ground and hurl him several meters away. He survived, but many did not. The true number of deaths will never be known, but entire nomadic groups disappeared without a trace. And yet, despite the unimaginable force of the blast, when the dust settled and the smoke drifted away, there was no crater, nothing to indicate what exactly had struck. The center of the explosion was nothing more than scorched earth and trees stripped clean of branches, their trunks still standing upright like charred poles. It looked as though the forest had been brushed by the hand of a giant passing through at unimaginable speed. In the days that followed, the sky glowed at night. Cities thousands of kilometers away in Europe reported strange nocturnal brightness, as if the atmosphere itself had turned into a cosmic lantern. People in London and Paris claimed they could read newspapers at midnight without any artificial light. Scientists later realized that dust from the explosion had risen so high into the atmosphere that it scattered sunlight across the entire hemisphere. But at the time, no one understood what was happening. The event was so distant from the civilized centers of the world that it didn't even make global headlines. It seemed at first like just another strange story from a place already full of mysteries. It would take 19 years before any scientific expedition even reached the site. Russia in 1908 had bigger problems: political instability, poverty, famine, and the rising tensions that would eventually lead to revolutions. The Tunguska region was so inhospitable, so remote, that organizing an investigation was nearly impossible. Not until 1927 did a scientist named Leonid Kulik, a mineralogist with a burning passion for meteorites, finally persuade the Soviet government to sponsor an expedition. What Kulik found when he arrived was staggering. The forest was still flattened, even 19 years later. Millions of trees lay on the ground, all pointing away from the center of the explosion in a perfect radial pattern. It looked eerily like the epicenter of a bomb test, but this was long before the nuclear age. The power involved had been unimaginable for something that left no crater. Kulik expected to find a massive iron meteorite buried underground, or at least pieces of one scattered around. But after weeks of searching, he found nothing. No fragments. No crater. No burned meteorite debris. Just devastation. Even stranger, the trees in the very center of the blast zone, trees that should have been violently torn from the ground, were standing upright. They were dead and stripped of their bark, but still standing. This butterfly pattern of destruction, with flat trees around the perimeter and upright trees at the center, suggested something had exploded in the air, not upon impact with the ground. But what could explode with the force of 1,000 atomic bombs without leaving physical evidence? For decades, scientists debated theories. Some said it was a comet, its icy core vaporizing before hitting the ground, leaving no solid remains. Others argued it must have been a stony asteroid that shattered in the atmosphere, its fragments too small to survive re-entry. Some believed it was a fragment of a much larger comet that had broken apart centuries earlier. The truth is, even today, more than a century later, no one is absolutely certain. The Tunguska explosion became a playground for speculation. Mystics claimed it was a punishment from the gods. Local Evenki shamans insisted it was the wrath of Agdi, the god of thunder. In the 1970s, some writers claimed it was a nuclear-powered alien spacecraft that exploded in the air. Others believed it was a miniature black hole passing through Earth, entering in Siberia and exiting somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. There were theories involving antimatter, cosmic rays, and otherworldly objects that defied the known laws of physics. Most of these theories were extreme, but they reflected one undeniable truth. Humanity had never seen anything like Tunguska before, and hasn't seen anything like it since. Modern scientific consensus suggests that it was likely a small asteroid, probably 50 to 80 meters wide, that entered Earth's atmosphere at incredible speed. The intense pressure and heating caused it to explode at an altitude of around 5 to 10 kilometers, releasing all its energy outward instead of downward. This would explain the flattened trees, the lack of a crater, and the atmospheric effects seen around the world. But even this explanation leaves questions. Why were no fragments found? Why were the atmospheric effects so extreme? Why did the explosion happen exactly where it did, one of the most remote and uninhabited places on Earth? The statistical unlikelihood of such a massive event occurring in such an empty region is staggering. Some call it luck. Others call it cosmic mercy. Had the Tunguska object exploded just a few hours later, it would have struck St. Petersburg, one of the largest cities in the Russian Empire. The death toll would have been catastrophic. Millions of lives lost in seconds. History itself might have changed. Revolutions might have unfolded differently. Political power might have shifted. The world that we know today might be entirely unrecognizable. This realization makes Tunguska even more uncanny. The largest explosion in human history happened almost precisely in the one place on Earth where it would kill the fewest people. As years passed and technology advanced, scientists revisited that remote patch of taiga. Satellite imagery revealed more about the blast pattern. Soil analysis uncovered microscopic particles consistent with extraterrestrial material. Trees displayed rings that reflected a sudden surge of atmospheric radiation, likely caused by cosmic forces. The event had forever imprinted itself into the biology of the region. Yet even with all the evidence, all the theories, and all the scientific models, one fundamental truth remains. Tunguska is still not fully explained. It sits in that rare category of historical events where nature behaves in ways that defy easy understanding. Every new discovery brings new questions. Every answer feels incomplete. Today the area is quiet again. The forest regrew. The fallen trees have rotted away. Moss covers the ground where shockwaves once thundered. It is peaceful, serene, deceptively ordinary. But beneath that calm lies the memory of a morning when the sky broke open and the world was reminded of its fragility. Tunguska stands as a symbol of how little control humanity truly has over the cosmos above, and how easily life on Earth could change in a single blinding moment. The Tunguska explosion is not just a scientific mystery. It is a warning, a reminder, a whisper from the universe that the forces governing our world are vast, ancient, and indifferent. And that somewhere out there, in the silent darkness of space, objects just like the one that destroyed Tunguska are still wandering, unpredictable, unseen, waiting.